Okay, hello YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about how to meet this particular trap that people can play against you. And there's similar traps that people can try in other d4, d5 setups, but this particular one starts after d4, d5, pawn to e3, which is the Colle system. We're going to have the normal move here, which is knight f6. We're going to have white reply with the normal move, which is knight f3, and then we're going to have bishop f5, getting that bishop outside the pawn chain. And now here, white's going to play this incredibly tricky move. He's going to play this move, knight to e5. So we're going to talk about why this move is incredibly tricky, what the trap is here, and why this move is, it's a little bit more sophisticated than you might think, even though it is breaking opening principle and moving the same piece twice. We're going to talk about how to meet it and how to get a good position with black starting from here. So anyways, if you like content like this and want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So this move is actually really tricky. And I've actually fallen for this trap. I'll admit, I've fallen for this trap a couple of times in bullet chess. When people play this in 1-minute chess, and I don't have time to think about it, and I might already have my finger on the mouse button or something like that, they're kind of hoping that you got your mouse already on the E7 square, and that when you see knight E5 that you won't, be ready to play knight on b to d7, but that you might accidentally play e6, which is, of course, a blunder. So this is the crux of kind of the whole trap, is after e6, they're going to play g4, bishop g6, h4, and this is actually already decisive advantage white. Like, h4 is a very, very strong move in this position. The point being that you can't really do anything to... If you try to save the bishop with h6 or h5, they're going to take on g6, they're going to mess up your pawns, and then when their bishop comes to d3, it's very, very difficult to defend the light squares. So this position is already just decisive advantage white, just a very, very powerful move. So what do you do? Like, how do you meet knight e5? Well, you should just develop. You should just develop a piece. And so the easiest move is probably just something like knight bd7. And the whole point is not just to develop a piece, but it's also, hey, if they're going to play a move like g4, I can just retreat my bishop not to g6, which is still bad, by the way. If you play bishop g6, h4, h6, knight g6, f g6, bishop d3, and you're basically lost. You can meet g4 by retreating your bishop to the e6 square. And now you should be okay. Now, but what's interesting is white's position, it's not clear if white's position is terrible. Like, white is down some tempo. He's spent some time, playing knight f3, knight e5. But at the same time, he's gained a lot of space. The e5 square is a pretty powerful square for the knight. And black's development, even though he is ahead on development 3 pieces to 1, his development's still a little awkward, and you still got a little bit of unwinding to do. So, of course, black's plan down the road here is going to be to play pawn to g6 to finish the development. So kind of what's the best plan here moving forward? Well, let's say white plays a move like h3, and he needs to play something to defend his g-pawn because, we're double attacking it. We were just threatening knight takes e5, followed by maybe knight takes g4. So defending g4 makes sense. Now we should just play knight takes e5 anyway. I like my opponent to have doubled pawns with weaknesses. So takes, and then we're going to bring this knight to e4. We're going to have knight to d2. And now probably the best is h5. Just try to break up this pawn structure. We'll say rook g1. He's going to hold it. We're going to play g6 now. And this should just be slight edge black. We've got our development pretty much set here. We're going to play bishop g7. We've got all of our pieces on pretty reasonable squares. And we've got some awkward pieces, yes, but so does white. White's bishop on c1 is awkward, and it's awkward to develop his rook on a1. And, kind of other development plans that you might come up with that don't revolve around getting that bishop to g7 as quickly as possible, those are some of the situations where you might actually start noticing that white's position with each progressive move just gets like a little bit better, because he's got that knight on e5. So if you're not catching up, so to speak, in your development in your space. Well, you're ahead in development, you're behind in space. So if you don't start catching up in space at some point, then you could actually end up in some trouble. But basically, that's sort of the short answer. That's how we deal with this early knight e5. We play knight d7. We don't play e6, and then after g4, we bring our bishop back to e6. So the only other thing we got to look at here is what if they try other moves? Because people will try other moves here. What if they try c4? Well, against c4, we should play e6. We should just defend that pawn. And now on g4, we do have knight takes e5. And the reason we have knight takes e5 here is, of course, if d takes e5, we're taking on g4. And if they take on f5, we're taking on c4. So once they've got c4 in, now this knight takes e5, knight to c4 plan should work, and that should be major advantage black. So I guess there's one other variation that we need to look at other than g4, other than c4, and this is move f3, and people do play this. And the easiest move that we can play against this is something like h5, and I've personally played this move several times, just like, okay, f3, h5, now you can't play g4, now I have to have a slight edge. So I usually just play h5 and just say, I have a slight edge, and just leave it at that. But it's also possible to not care at this point. You could get away with e6. And then after g4, and then say, of course, if bishop g6, h4 is still a problem, but we can just play knight takes e5 here. And then gf5, and then we can shuffle that knight back to c6. And I've tried stuff like this before as well, where you just let them play g4, you take on e5, and then shuffle the knight back. And you play knight c6, and the point is after fe6, fe6, yeah, you've got a weakness on e6 that they can attack, like bishop h3, bishop d6, but you just let them take it, because you're up a ton of tempo. So now after bishop takes e6, you're going to play queen e7, bishop back to h3, and then you're going to play knight h5. And this is actually already major advantage black, according to the engine, even though you're down a pawn, just because of all the threats and all the material you have. You have this, you have castle's kingside coming, you have rook ae8 coming, and there's just, it's too much. Like, black is just doing really, really well here. So this is actually major advantage black. So that is another option, is if you have enough development at a certain point, like after f3, e6, you don't care so much about g4 because you have so much development. You can play knight takes, shuffle that knight back, takes, and then just give them this pawn and just play this gambit style. Takes, and now knight h5 with all of these huge, massive threats. But in short, that is how you're going to meet knight to e5. Develop a piece with knight d7, and now you're ready to meet g4 with bishop to e6. And of course, if they play other moves, now that you're ready to play knight takes e5, you can usually meet other moves with either like h5, h6, or e6, and you're going to be a-okay. Okay, so anyways, I hope you learned something new about chess. I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.